Yeah. Hi, good morning, everyone. So I was asked to talk a little bit about my career, but because my career is, which is perhaps obvious from this very brief introduction, really quite bizarre, I have decided to supplement with talking sort of briefly about what I've seen other cognitive scientists do at various stages. Actually, I really like talking about this because it is a good reminder that cognitive science, or in my personal case, neuroscience, is just this incredibly interdisciplinary career, which is sort of applicable in wildly varying settings, right? From academia to sort of all sorts of industries, and all these very, very different jobs that you can end up doing. And so my goal here is not to be comprehensive, and I could never be comprehensive in all that you could do with a cognitive science degree. I talk about my experience and the experience of people I have directly observed. But I think to me, the most exciting thing is that most people sort of pick a job and do that job forever. You climb the ladder, but you don't magnificently change the type of work that you do. But with cognitive science, I think you actually have the opportunity to change your mind, and I think this is beautiful. So my career so far has been this array of very, very different things that you would not traditionally think should have been done by like the same person with the same education. So as Rijeka mentioned, I did my college in the States. I studied at Harvard. My degree was formally in evolutionary psychology and cognitive neuroscience, I think. But really, the sort of the American system allowed me to think about college as the experience of acquiring skills rather than just taking classes. And this, I think, is something that has been incredibly valuable to my future endeavors. Because I could acquire skills across topics, right? So I could take classes and sort of do internships and take on projects to learn all sorts of things that will turn out to be sort of a combination of skills that I would later need to do the various jobs that I've done. So things that you don't normally think about as a skill are actually a practicable muscle, like something that you can exercise. So things like defining a vague problem and turning a vague problem into an answerable question is something that's deeply, deeply needed in most business lines, and a lot of people don't know how to do. And actually, cognitive science forces you to do it because it is just such an open, wide field that if you don't sort of take this vague problem of like, oh, what does it mean to measure a theory of mind, and try to go from that wide question to a narrower, like, how do we create a task to measure this? You're just never really going to be successful, right? So cognitive science forces you to learn these like soft skills, define vague problems, start to problem solve by brainstorming, understand the data that's necessary for you to answer a particular question, define hypotheses that you're going to test. But then it also forces you into hard skills, right? Because this is not, it's not psychology. It requires you to set experimental paradigms, to set research experiments, which means that you need to like learn to code to set these things up. You need to learn to analyze large data sets, which again means working with different technologies. And so I think in some ways it can be really frustrating because you need to be a little bit of an expert in everything. But on the other hand, it sort of sets you up for success career-wise, because it truly does not linearly relate from what you've studied to what you're going to do. You have all these skills that you can apply in different settings. And so I think what I would sort of suggest is focusing in this stage of your career on trying different types of research to get an actual feel for what your day-to-day looks like, but not being sort of too deeply married to the type of research you're doing, because you will eventually get hired for your skills, not so much for the background, like I promise. Because when you go to an employer, when you're interested in a job, when you're interested in the type of work that somebody does, what you're going to need to show is that you can do research that you're interested in, and that you can gain skills that will sort of make you employable across a wide range of disciplines. And this linear path between like what your diploma is going to say and what you're going to do just will no longer exist. Like that era is gone. That is great. That's great news because it means that we can no longer get stuck in sort of the wrong job for our whole lives because we've made a slightly incorrect decision at age 18 or 22. But it is also a little bit tricky because it means we're now swimming in this vast sea of skills that we could acquire, and there's a limited number of hours in the day. And so we need to take responsibility for the skill set choices that we're making in order to be sort of become these fully rounded people who can do the jobs that the modern market requires of us. When I started at Facebook, I feel like I got hired for the stats skills that I had, and maybe some soft skills, and literally not at all for any of the research that I did in college, which I thought was the most exciting thing on the planet. And the work really combined all of the things that I've learned to do in college. So I would work with people who were not data experts. And so they would have unrealistic expectations of what you could do and could not do with the data. I was literally on a daily basis faced with very hairy, very poorly defined questions. People would come and ask these very wide questions and had sort of have no idea about whether we could dig in to find the data to answer that question. I had to do a lot of educating about what data science and people analytics is and it is not. So I would, work with these people to define their problem, then go into the data to try and dig for the data that would give us the answer to their question, and then go back with analyzed data or a research experiment that we had set up to inform the stakeholder. It is a fun interplay. Like, it is not the kind of job I expected to be doing, but it was really cool. And I learned new skills that then sort of set me up for my PhD. I guess what I'm trying to point out is that what my diploma said I had done was not actually what directly linked to the job that I ended up doing. I landed at Oxford for a combination of sort of personal and professional reasons, which I think is a silly thing to say, but it's true. But I got really lucky, and I didn't know that this was important. When I was doing it, because I had worked at Facebook, I was used to very hands-off managers. Facebook was not a place where you were told what to do. You were given a problem and sort of told, go off, fix it. And I landed at Oxford and found a true sort of advisor in Jeff Bird, which is something that I would recommend you look for in people who are going to help you along your career, whether that's in academia or in industry. Jeff was truly an advisor and a mentor and not a supervisor. And for people who are cognitive scientists, I think it can be really hard to get someone who's a micromanager and supervises very closely, because it sort of stifles this creativity that comes with the job, that comes with the skill set. Again, I do think that it's great that you get someone who's quite sort of there in the background, but not hovering, because it means that you're following your career path from the get-go. You're sort of getting to choose really early what you want to do. And I think, like, in my personal case, it is the only reason that I've been able to get a professorship job straight out of a PhD. Most people, I think, don't have the opportunity simply because they haven't been allowed to be independent enough. But it's also really tricky. And I guess I don't want to overplay like how hard it is to be told to go fix a problem when you don't even know which tools you should be using to fix it. So any mistakes you make are entirely your own, and you need to sort of know the boundaries of your own expertise, so that you can, as a cognitive scientist who's not an expert in any of the 6 things you do, but sort of dabbling in all of them, you need to know when you're asking for help. I think that's probably the trickiest bit of what we do in these really interdisciplinary careers. You're a statistician for your own projects, but you're not actually an expert statistician. You are a developer of your own experiments, but you're not actually an expert software engineer. You are, I don't know, right? Like, with all these things, you become just competent enough in the field to fix your own problems and to solve your own challenges, but you're not actually an expert in the field. And so understanding what you know how to do and where you need to seek help, I think, is one of the most challenging bits of doing this as a career. Even though I have ended up in sort of a traditional academic role, I keep working with a startup, as Rijeka has mentioned. And to me, this has been an incredible balance of academia and industry, allowing me to do both, allowing me to do things sometimes really quickly and do like a quick and dirty solution, get it to customers. Whereas in academia, everything is always very slow and sort of detailed and takes forever to get out. So I work at Orgnostic. Orgnostic is a holistic integrated people analytics platform, which sort of aims to reduce the cost of people analytics and democratize access to people analytics. I work as a director of product for insights, which means that my team sort of digs into the data of all of our customers to look for insights across different data sets that you would not normally be able to sort of just glimpse from one. So we look at things that you can only see when you merge multiple data sets, and we look for trends that are worrisome or excellent, and we highlight those to customers so they know what to focus their energies on. And I also lead our data science on demand team, which is perhaps the most exciting bit of my job, which means that I basically get to do what I did at Facebook from a scientific perspective with different clients. So every like 6 weeks to 3 months, I go into a different company and work with them on a problem that they have and try to define a problem and try to understand the problem and then try to find the data that will help them answer the problem or track it over time and work with their stakeholders to recommend solutions. It is the dynamic aspect of this job is perhaps its most exciting thing, really. And so I'm actually not going to talk a little more about my career. I'll mention a few other people and sort of the directions that they've gone in. I know you've had a lot of exposure to UX research today and product development in tech. There are obviously careers outside of tech that you could do or in tech related and applied to other fields. So I have quite a few friends who have decided to go into policy because cognitive science, again, placed them well into hairy problem solving with different stakeholders who have very different expertise. Quite a few friends who have ended up in education, so whether that's ed tech or education itself, like actually teaching classes, or pedagogical research, or ed policy or ed tech. That is also, I think, a field that a lot of people have gone into. And then in tech, the sort of range of jobs that you can end up doing is a lot wider than just being like a product designer or a product manager or UX designer. So I have friends who have ended up doing sort of VC work for tech companies because they're, again, able to understand very different competing priorities. They're able to understand deeply technical products. They're able to ask the right questions of founders who come asking for funding. So VC is an excellent avenue. I have a lot of friends who have ended up in finance because they, again, have a really good understanding of how humans actually behaviorally act along with the technical skills to be able to query large data sets and look for patterns in data, which is, again, a muscle that you need to train. So you can go many different ways. Again, this is going to depend largely on the skill set that you choose to acquire over your period during a master's or during sort of further education and alongside it. But I hope that my example and my very bizarre career choices and sort of flipping back and forth between industry and academia serve as a reminder that whatever you decide, you are not stuck in that one choice that you're making at this point in time. So you can go back, you can change your mind. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about cognitive science.